my name is Alyssa. I'm a ranger here at Soto National Memorial, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys some information on fishing regulations so that when you go out and fish wherever you might be, you can make sure it's sustainable and for future generations to enjoy as well. So what I'm most likely going to be basing most of my stuff off of today is going to be Florida saltwater recreational fishing regulations. However, each state is going to be different. Even some counties in states are going to be different. So make sure you check out your Fish and Wildlife Services in your own state. And these change quite often, so even though I'm doing 2020, it's going to change in just a couple months, so make sure you're up to date on those. Now, for fishing at our park, we're mostly doing shoreline fishing, and because we're so close to the Gulf, it's going to be mostly saltwater, which is why I'm using saltwater regulations. So if you come to our park, you do need a shoreline saltwater license to fish here. Now, there are a few different licenses in Florida, so make sure you get the correct one. They're different for freshwater and saltwater, and they're also different for different kinds of fishing. So if you fish from the shoreline or if you fish from a boat, and etc. So what I'm going to do, the best way we have found to explain some of these fishing regulations is to actually use some examples of fish. So what I'm going to be using first is this Spanish mackerel. Spanish mackerel in my book has two regulations for it. The first being size. So the reason size is one of the regulations is because we need to make sure that these fish have grown to maturity and have at least reproduced enough that they've replenished the population. So if we take one out, it's not going to hinder the population in any way. So this one is about 12.5 inches, and our regulation is 12 inches. So I would be able to keep this mackerel. However, we do have a second regulation as well. And that second regulation is going to be a bag limit. So what the bag limit is it's going to tell you how many of these fish you can keep per harvest or per day that you go out and catch these fish. So the bag limit for the Spanish mackerel is 15, and that means if you catch 15 or more of these fish and they're the correct size, all you can take with you is 15. So even if you catch 16 of them and they all meet that minimum size length, you still have to throw one back because you can only take 15 of them. Now this is just to help make sure that we're not harvesting too many fish at once, because we don't want to diminish their population even though they've reached maturity, and we're hoping that they have reproduced and spawned and created more mackerel. We're not positive. We don't want to hurt this population so much so that they cannot recover. So that's kind of why we have a bag limit and why we have a minimum size length. Now, I also have a snook over here, which you'll notice they're about the same size, but my snook has a bag limit of only one snook per harvest. Now that's because this snook is really desirable and people really want this snook. It's looked at as a really prized fish. So more people are trying to catch snook than are trying to catch mackerel, meaning we kind of have to put more of a limit on how many snook you catch, because if we made it too high of a number, we might really hurt the snook population by catching too many of them. Now for the snook, I said it was about the same size, but I'll go ahead and measure it again. Again, from the head to the tip of its tail. And for the snook, we not only have a minimum size limit, which is 28 inches, and mine's only about 13, so I wouldn't be able to keep him. but it also has a maximum size limit. So here on the Gulf side of Florida, the regulation for snook is a minimum of 28 inches and a maximum of 33 inches. So if I caught a snook that was 35 inches long, I still would not be able to keep that snook. I'd have to put it back. And that's again to help make sure that population can reproduce. Now snook also have a season, so they spawn or reproduce in different seasons, and we don't want to disturb that. So they put seasons on when you can catch them so that we don't hurt the population. Now this last one's my favorite. This is a ladyfish. And if you go through these fishing regulations, at least the one sitting in front of me, ladyfish are not found in the regulations. And that's because they're not regulated. So I don't even have to measure a ladyfish if I catch one. I can keep it if I want. But most people don't really like ladyfish. They don't have a lot of meat on them. The meat's not super tasty. So usually people aren't trying to catch ladyfish. However, if you do catch a ladyfish, you can always turn it into bait because a lot of other fish like it. Now, just because it might not be pictured in your magazine if you have the same thing that I have, doesn't mean it's not regulated. So even though that ladyfish isn't in here and is not regulated, there are some things down in this box at the bottom that are prohibited species. So they don't have a picture, but if you catch them, you have to release them. You can't keep them no matter what kind of size they are, no matter what season. You always have to put them back. Just because if you take these out, they're gonna really hinder the environment around them. And if everybody took them, we would drastically hurt their populations. So a lot of the things on here are gonna be like sharks, manta rays, there's even some conches on here. So before you go out, make sure you read all your regulations, especially some of the remarks that are under certain fish. They might tell you that certain counties in your state have certain regulations on fish, and also it might tell you a little bit about how you can fish them. Some fish can be speared, some fish cannot be speared. So just making sure you read all your regulations, know before you go, and have a wonderful time fishing.